So tonight, I love the name, The Futile Attack Upon Reality, which is the perfect name because that's exactly what the ego does.
That is what the ego is.
Yeah. So this is obviously, can be quite a huge conversation, but we'll trust that we're guided and we'll distill it into the right, conversation for us here tonight.
Yeah. The theme for this month is the tiny mad idea. And the tiny mad idea from the Course is basically the belief that I'm separate. And, I think the Course gives the best definition for ego that could possibly be given, which is, of course, the belief in separation. And, there's different ways of talking about what the ego is. Within the spiritual community itself, I think there's a lot of really lazy definitions, or maybe just kind of misguided definitions that kind of end up doing more harm than good for what ego is. And so people end up saying, well, you can't live without your ego, man. So you better just get used to it. The ego is your sense of self. How are you going to live without that? Which is, of course, what ego would want you to believe. You can't live without me.
Right.
So I love that the Course gets very accurate with its terminology. It's just a belief in separation, which is why we say it doesn't exist, because it's not an entity that can be gotten rid of. It's a perspective, we could say. I like to teach the ego as the mental activity of claiming or identifying. Mm-hmm. So we could also say that the ego is the belief in separation that becomes the activity of identifying.
Yeah, nice. I want to back up for a minute too, because I think you've called the Course in Miracles cheeky, I think is the word you've used before. Yeah. But when it says, the tiny mad idea that we're separate from God and we forgot to laugh. That's what follows it. It's like, that the tiny mad idea and the simple problem that existed after that, if you will, that tiny mad idea was that we forgot to laugh at it.
Yeah.
Laugh at it, meaning like, this isn't real. This is a joke. This is, a made up idea. And out of that, flows an entire made up experience. And like you said, attachment, identification, and ultimately, like we've talked about, it is really the thing that keeps us locked in the most into this identification is the body, the belief that we are the body. And I think you teach on that so well. I mean, I think you've really got that idea down in you.
Yeah. Well, it's what set me free. It really was. Being identified with the body is the cause of all misery and pain. And that's what ego does. It says, I am this body. Because I am separate, I must find out what I am. That's what makes me safe. So the ego, looks out through the body's eyes and says, well, I must be this body. Who would question that? Seems obvious. But that's what turns into this belief that if I'm this body, then I'm not everything else. Yeah. So other people are not me. Reality itself, the universe itself is not me. And so I think the best way to talk about this, and we touched on this a few lessons ago, we talked about this idea that, consciousness is just like this infinite field of possibility.
Yeah.
And so we are consciousness, the Christ, as the Course puts it. And so if we are consciousness, which is the infinite field everywhere all the time, how can an infinite field have an experience, right? It's everything all the time. So if God wants to experience itself in these different forms, it has to localize into something. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, it would be experiencing every point of view in the universe simultaneously, every sound in the universe simultaneously, every smell, every touch sensation, right? So that's not an experience. So we could say like the entry cost that consciousness has to pay to have an experience is to forget itself and seemingly be limited or filtered into a finite form, which is a body. And that's what, I am the body is the birth of the ego, or the beginning of the dream of separation. So the Course in Miracles says the body is the ego's home by its own election. It's the only identification with which the ego feels safe, since the body's vulnerability is its own best argument that you cannot be of God. Because if I'm this body can be attacked, it can be abused, it can be abandoned, betrayed, and so forth. So God can't be any of those things. So you're definitely not God, is the ego's logic.
Yeah.
So the Course says the ego, this is the belief the ego sponsors eagerly, and it will not go down without a fight. You know, when you try to give up this idea, it will fight you tooth and nail, because the body is the ego's whole sense of self, right? So it can't give that up or it's going to be annihilated.
Yeah.
So when we go about this journey of changing and cleansing and healing our perception, I'm not this body, I am the eternal Christ, the light of God. Be ready for war with ego, right? It's gonna battle you on that front. But as the Course says, the truth does not fight with the false, right? The real doesn't fight with the unreal. It
Right.
merely stands firm and convicted in what it is and allows the false to be seen for the unreality that it is. That's how we fight the ego. We just let it be exposed.
Yeah. Yeah. And to even slow down or to go deeper into that identification experience, the thing that the ego uses to keep one feeling identified and separate, and the energy of afraid, alone, I did something to God, I did something wrong, I am something wrong. These are the beliefs which really all point to guilt. And the Course talks
Yes.
a lot about guilt. Guilt is the fuel that really keeps the ego alive. And much of guilt is subverted. It's like it's in the subconscious world. Yeah, subconscious.
Yeah.
The subconscious world. It's because we don't fully bring it into our awareness, and it's the way that the ego keeps it. It's like it's got it pushed down, and it just like uses it to keep you in the fear and to keep itself alive. And so the Course's work is to really purify us and bring us to the freedom from this thing called guilt.
Yeah.
To really set us free from that. But man, guilt will it'll use your past stories. It will use your body. It will use something you've said. It's really works hard 24/7, man.
Oh, yes. Ego consciousness is exhausting.
Yeah.
It's just constantly burning up a tremendous amount of energy. And as you were touching on, Mark, the reason guilt is the linchpin for the ego's program is because guilt is really like the strongest possible form of identification, right? With anything. I really am the doer. Boo-hoo, poor me. So ego needs you. You know, ego is the activity of being identified. That's where it gets its power from, collecting more forms to identify with. So it's going to try to invest you with guilt for literally everything. And we're just kind of unaware or oblivious to the fact that everything we do in ego consciousness, of course, there's a little voice in the back of our mind saying like, you did that, you did that. And if it's not the perfect, most pleasurable outcome possible, ego is going to say, shame on you. You should have done better. You could have done better, right?
Yeah.
And that's personal doership, the belief in personal doership. Now, the Course doesn't use the term personal doership like that as a traditional like Advaita term, but guilt is the Course's terminology for personal doership. Because
Nice.
it's the belief that I did it, right? I'm the body that did the action.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That's so good. I hope you guys heard that. That's a great definition of guilt. And, just as we're talking, y'all, just kind of become aware of how much that personal doership, not only does it catch, people in this, oh, I did this, I said that, it extends to like, oh, I'm responsible for how my partner's feeling, or how my husband or wife is like it will extend to take responsibility for other people's reactions, for other people's experience of life, for other people. Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
It has no boundaries in its insanity.
I'm glad you said that, because that's also the definition of guilt, is insanity. Because guilt is to say that shouldn't have happened, or you shouldn't have done that. And that's the ego's futile attack on reality. What could be more insane than arguing with reality? You know what I mean? It's like, if I did that, I should have done that. Like, that's exactly how my programming forced my body to behave.
Yeah.
The response that came out of me was what my conditioning indicated. I didn't have a choice in the matter. There's no, the Buddha said, actions happen and deeds are done, but there's no individual doer thereof, because everything is connected to everything else. So the whole ocean of life is waving and moving all the time. You're being influenced by your environment all the time. And then the ego in its supreme arrogance rises up to say, I, the isolated entity from the ocean, have done it by myself. And that's insane, right? Whatever happens in reality had to happen. So the sooner that we see that, the sooner we find peace, because we stop taking personal ownership over everything and we just become the observer. If a response comes out of this mind-body unit that I don't feel fond of, or I feel like, oh, that wasn't very loving, I just observe that, okay, there's still some distorted conditioning being worked out. I see that. I'm going to love that part of me and bring it to the truth.
Yeah.
But when we stay in guilt, we don't have that awareness. We identify with that distorted conditioning and say, I really am that horrible person who said that thing, which means you better believe you're going to say it again the next time that thing happens.
You just guaranteed that.
The way it is.
Yeah, it is really something to literally, like, just imagine everybody, like, something blurts out of you, something said, you made an ass out of yourself, whatever happens, and then to not even identify, to just be like, oh, well, that's what came through. I mean, that is really where it really starts to lose its hold upon you, where it's like, don't even take personal. Not only do you not take personally what other people say or do, but you literally don't take personally what is said or thought through you.
Yes.
That's freedom.
That's freedom, right? Like, you don't have to take ownership over everything that happens in the flow of life, because you're also just one of those waves undulating in the great ocean of being. And so all you can really do is observe. Yeah. So it's like, if something happens through me that's not desirable, ego, every time ego invests me with guilt, it's sort of like stamping an anchor point in my consciousness from which it can control me now. It can maneuver me to behave how it wants me to, because now we're trying to escape that guilt all the time. So we're on this endless goose chase, basically, to escape something that's not actually real to begin with. So because the ego is the belief that I'm this body, it's going to claim everything the body does, me, my, mine, that's ego. So the belief in personal doership creates guilt. And the Course says guilt is the cause of pain in any form. So really, guilt is all suffering is guilt in some form or fashion.
Yeah. 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 I'm having a thought and I want to share, which is, it doesn't mean because I'm detached, because, like, say something comes through me that is, I'm like, wow, that was not kind, or that was whatever it was. It doesn't mean I'm just like walking around going, oh, well, that's the ego and that's what it does. It doesn't exclude me from taking responsibility. It doesn't exclude me meaning that, oh, what would love do now in response to this? It doesn't mean that there might not be something that I want to go back and say, or something that I might want to redo, if you will, or return to love kind of experience. So I'm not just going to walk through just annihilating people and not taking.
I'm not the doer.
I'm unattached. That's the ego. That's not evolution. You're not going to awaken spiritually. The first step is detachment. And I just want to add, including, for me, responsibility at times, like not to feel bad or guilty, but to feel responsible if there's something that's next, that's wanted. Does that make sense?
Yes. And that's another great point. I use this analogy of, I call it the walking the dog phase of spiritual awakening, where you are aware that you're not your ego, but your ego's still making messes everywhere it goes.
Yes.
You know? So it's like, if I'm walking my dog and my dog craps on somebody's lawn, I'm not gonna be like, well, I'm not the doer.
Right.
What a horrible dog owner, right?
Shit up.
Pick your shit up. Right? I still get the bag and I go clean up the dog's mess, but I don't walk back to the house to the trash can going, oh, why did I do that? I shouldn't have crapped on their lawn.
Yes.
The whole time I'm innocent inwardly. So it's like, if I am love, which is what we say we are in ACIM, then all of these misperceptions of ego that are still flowing through the person I bring those to loving awareness and I clean up those messes.
Yeah.
I say something rude to somebody, or the body says something rude to somebody, and I go, oh, wow, that was unkind. Hey, I'm so sorry I said that. That wasn't right of me. I hope you forgive me for that. But inwardly, I'm not taking responsibility of why did I do that? Why did I say that? Because again, that will keep you in that cycle of saying those things.
Well, and if I can add to that, I mean, we didn't mean to go down this rabbit hole, but I always love when we get a new rabbit hole created in the moment, is when you're doing it just from a true detachment and you're not doing it from guilt, it's authentic, and you're not bringing all this baggage to the apology or to the amends or something. It's really clean. There's a purity to the picking up the shit that it's just very simple. Yeah. And it isn't like, because when you're stuck in guilt, what we're really do is overlaid in the amends, overlaid in the connection is I feel bad about myself. And now you make sure that I don't feel bad by forgiving me. Like it gets really messy when we're attached and we're identified.
It does. And as weird as this might sound, you can really fall in love with cleaning up your shit. You really can. You can find joy and pleasure in it because it's just that simple fact of like, whatever I judge, I perpetuate.
Yeah.
Whatever I love, I heal. But what I judge, I cannot love. So if I'm feeling guilty for what I just said, that's judgment. I shouldn't have done that. Was bad, wrong, shame on me, poo-poo on me. That's judgment. So that means I'm not in love, which means I can't heal it. So you're literally living from this place where you're watching yourself become healed all the time by taking responsibility for the messes the person's creating. Every time I clean up that mess with love, I heal that mess. I can be sure it won't happen again.
Yeah, this is so good. And what I love about this is taking the teachings of the Course and applying it so that we're living better lives. And that, to me, that's one of the byproducts. Like we just become more mature. We become free, and our relationships get better. Our accountability, all those things get kind of blessed or uplifted from this. And that's what really turns me on.
Yeah, 100%. It's like as soon as you want healing and you're tired of suffering, you want to get free, you're willing to do whatever it takes. You'll apologize to the whole neighborhood if that's what it takes. It's nothing to you anymore. It's the ego and its arrogance. Like, no, I'm not going to say sorry for that. And it's like, cool, then you just need to suffer more. That's all. You're just not humble enough yet. Yeah. So love brings us to that humility where we're more than happy to take responsibility for the mistakes we make, because we know in that process, in that act of loving our wounds and loving our distortions, we're healing them and getting rid of them in that sense. Yeah. So it's like, oh, in this moment, like this is the opportunity right now where I can get free. What could be more exciting than that to somebody who wants to be free?
Yeah. And if you're not feeling that, you're feeling defended. That's the ego's stance. You can just go, if you're getting defensive, if you're blaming, if you're going on these kind of shame spirals or whatever, that's just the ego's game. And if it gets you, you'll get out. Even that awareness is a great step forward.